Welcome to the Real People, Real Business Show. My name is Stephanie Hayes, and I'm a business strategist and coach who loves to speak with like-minded entrepreneurs to share their real stories and the gritty details on building their businesses. On this show, you won't hear about the glamorized entrepreneurship journeys that you see online, and you won't be told how to make six figures in 6 weeks. Instead, you can expect to hear real, vulnerable, and inspiring stories that you can relate to that have helped create the foundation of each of our guests' businesses. Goodbye, boss babes, and hello, real-life entrepreneurs. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Jaime D. Jaime works with small businesses to craft comprehensive, big agency caliber branding with the customization and accessibility exclusive to one-on-one consulting. Welcome to the show, Jaime, and thanks so much for taking the time to share your story today.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. I really appreciate it.
Now, here's what's so awesome about Jaime is that we are doing this while she is in Tokyo. Well, she lives in Tokyo, but you grew up in Los Angeles.
I did. Yes.
And so tell me all about how you made that kind of journey.
So I mean, that kind of journey is something that is always kind of strange, I guess. But growing up, I always had this feeling. I can remember at a very young age that I always knew that I was going to do something with other countries. I can remember as early as 5. And so I had my first experience when I was in university in Southern California. I went to Cal State Long Beach, and I studied abroad in Italy for 6 months. And that was kind of my first taste of that. But it was very sheltered. I was in a program, other international students. And then there happened to be a lot of international students in the design program when I went back to Cal State Long Beach. And that's where I met my then boyfriend, now husband, who was an international student from Japan. So he wanted to go back home. I said, yes, please. And he made it very, very easy for me. And we spent several years bouncing back and forth from the US to Japan. And right now we are living in Tokyo.
And you have a little girl.
Yes, we have a little girl, Kokomi. She's almost 6. And with both my husband and I being creative, she's right there in the middle of us. Right now, she's very interested in fashion design, and we all sit and talk about concept together. So whatever she wants to do, but that's where we're at right now.
Oh, I love it. So you went from design school and then you went and worked with some agencies and kind of really cut your teeth in sort of the big agency land before you kind of landed in this consulting role, right? So tell me a little bit more about how the business actually developed.
Yeah, so I actually studied interior architecture, and right off the bat, I was working as a junior designer. Actually, when I was still a student, I was working as a junior designer in an interior architecture firm. And then right after I graduated, I made the leap to living in Japan. And being very new to the language, having only taken Japanese 101, I started teaching English and trying to do a little freelancing on the side. And then I kind of fell into freelance designing, but I've never really had a career in a big agency.
So you have the experience with the big agency, but you really work in this kind of one-on-one, very intimate capacity with your clients. And who are the clients that you're serving right now?
Yeah, so I work primarily with wellness and socially conscious businesses, small businesses who are really invested in working for the greater good. I have had experiences to work with more corporate level businesses, working one-on-one with marketing directors. So that does come about from time to time. I do find that I really enjoy the kind of direct nature of working one-on-one with a business owner because things can move so much quicker. There are a few hoops that you have to jump through. My focus is branding. So it's so much more than the visuals. I do pretty much what a big agency would do, understanding how branding can actually move the needle in your business and how it can function as a business tool.
Yeah, because branding is about so much more than a logo and your visuals. And so do you have a custom framework that you take people through, or is there, a specific format that you use with the work that you do with your clients?
Absolutely. Being both a designer and a strategist allows me to really dig in from the very beginning. And usually working with experienced businesses, they have so much knowledge. So I like to really listen, learn from the beginning. And then we either go through a brand audit or brand strategy. So for both of those, I have set frameworks. The brand audit is a 4-point framework, which goes through different areas of analyzing how your business is perceived in the market based on the activity that you're doing, based on what you're putting out into the world, or some other pre-existing conditions related to your business, and examining those. And my brand strategy is a 5-point framework, which analyzes market trends, looking at market data, what your mission is in your business, understanding peripheral markets, and mapping out a plan based on all of those findings and working together, mapping out a plan to connect the dots to actually cross that gap between where you are and where you envision your business to be, so that everything is intentional, that if you don't need to redesign, you shouldn't redesign. If you need to work on your messaging, then that's where you're focusing your resources. So everything is always about understanding what can you repurpose, what you need to do, never reinventing the wheel, because it doesn't make sense to do things for vanity, or just because someone else says so or someone else did it.
Totally. And so you have focused on the health and wellness space, or impact driven organizations. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So give me some examples. Who might you work with, and where might they sort of come from?
Yeah, I work mainly with businesses who are in English-speaking countries all over the world, or individuals who do business in English. They may be based anywhere. And I've worked with businesses such as apothecaries, nutraceutical businesses, people who are in the B2B space, doing kind of the earlier phase of food production and ingredients for items that you see in Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, acupuncturists, people like that.
And what drew you to that sort of niche, or that genre?
I've always been very kind of aware of, growing up in the 80s, it was always like, make sure don't be a litter bug. And there were all of these big campaigns. But I always felt really good about that kind of thing, never taking it to an extreme, but just seeing how I could incorporate that in my life. And the first time that we moved back from Tokyo to the US was in 2008, and it was during the mortgage crisis. And I had not worked in design for a few years, being out of the country. So I tried to get a job in interiors, and I couldn't. And my husband said to me, okay, in the town we're living in, there's a lot of environmental activity. He recommended me to find the person at the local city hall who was in charge of an environmental fair that was coming up, and to go and pitch to them to rebrand the event. So we did it for free. I made a whole presentation. I sat on the board. I ended up taking over that event a few years later, but it was because of the kind of my existing interest, but then the nature of this town, little town in San Diego called Encinitas, where environmentalism is such at the forefront, and everyone does yoga, everyone surfs, everyone was very aware at that time of plastic bags and that kind of thing. So just out of circumstance, this evolved. And then out of being involved in that event, that's where my first clients came from, who were in the same sector.
So there's the sort of branding world, there's all sorts of different types of services and types of service providers. What sort of sets you apart, and what would your clients be looking for that would draw them to you?
Yeah. Well, I work with experienced businesses. So most business owners have worked with a branding professional at some point, but probably the branding that most business owners have experienced is more heavy on the visual side. And, everyone's had redesign website, refresh logo on their list of to-dos, but I come from a place that I listen to what your goals are. What issues are you facing? And if you come to me saying, I'd like to redesign my logo, I dig and dig and dig into why. And if that doesn't make sense, if that's not going to help you achieve your goal, if you're trying to increase revenue and I see that will not happen, I will flat out tell you. And if you're interested in hearing, stepping back and hearing about how to actually make a plan that helps you to move forward toward your goals with branding, then we might be a right fit. And if not, then that's okay too. But something that really sets me apart is that I never want you to pay for something that you do not need. I have your best interest at heart as another business owner. I would never want someone to advise me to do something that is not going to be helpful. Because especially when you work alone, you don't have enough time, enough energy, and budget is a real thing. So I come from a place of collaboration.
So what is it that drives people to think branding is their issue when perhaps it's not?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what branding actually is. And it's only been in, maybe I'd say about the last 15 years that branding has started to be clarified and designed in business. So I think that people will think that their look is outdated. That's kind of the first thing, or they see a competitor's website and they start to have some kind of FOMO or jealousy, and it can be prompted by that. I think it's hard because it's very intricate. I define branding as being how other people perceive you based on everything that's out in the world, and we can't control that. So it's similar to having a conversation with a doctor and getting to the root of the problem. So it's very easy to self-diagnose and to have some kind of other idea about what's going on when that really doesn't get to the root of the problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will feel the pressure in their business and they get a little bit anxious, and then they kind of look around and they see all the possible kind of obvious options. And if they are a little outdated, I mean, I can see how they get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when do you think is the best time for someone to come and look for upgrading their branding or taking their branding in a new direction?
I think that's a great question. For me, it's when you're setting new goals in your business, when you're seeing where you're not hitting the mark. And it's very easy when you're in the online space to latch on to all of the shiny objects out there, the big program or the celebrity entrepreneur or something you may have not tried. But when you're goal setting and understanding that your skill set is unique, your experiences are unique, especially when you're a more experienced business owner, you've gone through, your journey is quite different from others. Acknowledging those things, acknowledging that, if you're in a group program, oftentimes, more than half of the things that will be discussed. So what kind of unique plan, what kind of unique approach will fit what you have to take you where you're trying to go? So when goal setting happens, then that's the best time for me to have a conversation with someone.
And to be honest, goal setting happens, throughout the year, but this sounds like
Absolutely.
it's when there's like a big shift or a transition where,
Mm-hmm.
almost the mission or the feel of the business is starting to shift a lot. And I think that happens at least every few years. I know for me, if I looked at my branding from 6 years ago, it's very different than where we are now. And it almost seems like it's gotten more and more refined in terms of the message. And like you, I've always thought branding is what other people say about you, right? And what other people think about you. And then you go into the actual execution of that, which is the design, or which is perhaps the copy or the messaging or what have you. So I think right at that very core, I think that's critical for everything that happens in that next phase of business, right?
Absolutely. The market is constantly changing the way we engage with others because of our society. Our society has been changing so much, especially in the past few years. And our own ideas evolve as we experience different things. So things are always moving. And then, yeah, understanding does the way that you're communicating with your audience, does that still match?
I think it's important externally, but I think it's also really important internally in terms of being able to move forward with the like that new phase or that those new goals. Being able to understand and clarify. I know when I couldn't quite clarify what my message was or clarify what I stood for, it made it really hard to make decisions about what I was going to prioritize or take on or the work that I was going to do. So it's as much internal as it is external, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's a great point. And, whether you are a team of one or a team of many, having the way you think about yourself and the way others who are working behind the scenes think and feel about the business is 50% of branding. Branding is both external and internal. We don't talk about that internal branding so much with small businesses. But, when for example, I was speaking with a coach who was telling me very much so about she was building wealth for her clients. And then we discussed, on the other hand, about her VA in the Philippines. And we found that in order to bring her branding up to speed, that she needed to also be helping to build wealth for that VA in the Philippines, so that both sides felt good and that she also felt good about everything that was happening. So everything's moving in the same direction.
That's so much deeper, right? And then
Mhm.
it appears at the beginning. One of my best friends is a brand strategist as well. And she says, I kind of want all my clients to go and work with you first, because that really deep foundational defining yourself and defining your business is actually really critical to then it's almost parallel or there's overlap and it dovetails nicely into all the branding work that she would do. And we're talking like branding, not design and
Mhm.
the physical visual brand. And so there's
Mhm.
this, your brand really is rich, isn't it? And
Mm.
it comes really from you to begin with.
Absolutely. Stephanie, I think that's an excellent point, that being so clear on your business and how your business carries out your mission, similarly, it's through the work that you do, being clear on that and how you're going to execute on that and how it makes sense in all the different layers, and then taking that and putting it out into the world. Um, it reminds me just, of the human experience. As we know ourselves more, we feel more comfortable in our relationships and how we move around in the world. So our businesses, in some sense, could be a personification of ourselves or another entity that we built that's inspired on or somehow reflects us.
And we built like we're all these kind of special snowflakes, right? We all take all this collection of experiences that we've had. Like, look at your experiences, and you've been in Italy, and now you're working in Tokyo and serving an international audience. Like, that's a different experience than someone else has got. And so even your brand is going to be different than another. And I see it as such a very personal like fingerprint, and it really has to culminate in something that feels so closely tied to you in your heart, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That feeling right about things. This is something that I've been talking a lot about these days, is feeling right about things, feeling right when you go into something in your business. If it just feels a little off, acknowledging that. Is that because you're pushing yourself into something new, or is that because it's not quite right for you? And that's okay, because there are infinite ways to approach things. And that's what's so special about working with a strategist and a consultant, that you can take your unique needs and feelings and whatever's going on in your life, acknowledging that. Are you dealing with health issues? Do you have things in a relationship that's going on? Whatever it is, all of those things are valid, and putting those together into a unique plan that works for you. You don't have to fit into someone else's box.
No, you sound like you're speaking about my services too. I'm so adamant about this, that we have very personalized business models. It's not enough. It's not enough to just apply yourself and squeeze yourself into some cookie cutter framework, because it just doesn't work. And I know most of my clients come to me and they are not coming to me saying, oh, I need to make a whole bunch more money. They're coming to me and saying, I want my business to feel better. And really, after we do our work, they should move on and work with someone like you to really distill that and distinguish that and come up with something vibrant and rich.
Yeah, I think that there's less focus these days. Several years ago, there was such like an on and off of business. At work, you only discuss these topics, and after you only discuss these. And I mean, for me, coming from that and knowing that I want to present myself in a certain way, that's one thing. But then at the same time, acknowledging, especially because I work in the wellness and socially conscious space, I have many clients who deal with issues like autoimmune issues, Lyme's disease, things like this, that they will have days that, they'll tell me, Jamie, today I'm experiencing brain fog, so I need your help. And knowing, okay, this is a part of you and your story and your business. So how can we make things work for you?
Yeah, exactly. Gone are the days where we have to, I mean, God, I did that. I worked in the .com era, and we would show up every day of the week, no matter how sick or troubled we were. It was every day, 7 days a week, and 12-hour days. And it was seen as a badge of honor. Well, that doesn't happen. I mean, I never want my clients to work like that ever again. Like, it's just, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But we came out of that, and now we're here, and it feels like there's a renaissance.
Yeah. And, I think on the flip side, though, we have to be aware that there are some things that are happening in marketing that are trying to capitalize upon people's weaknesses. So being aware that, there are two sides to everything. But just something I urge people to do is just really make sure, vet who you're working with. Yes. Make sure this feels right for you, that you feel comfortable and safe, and because it comes back to that feeling right.
Yeah. I mean, we could have a whole other conversation on that topic for sure, but there's a lot of, I think people are starting to wise up, right? I think that this whole sort of online business space is getting to that sort of getting past teenagerhood and starting to get into young adulthood, where we start to see some of the chinks in the armor, right? And the holes in what we've been believing for so long. And this kind of celebrity culture is starting to be worn down, but it's interesting, and it's been kind of interesting to watch it grow over the past few years. I want to talk to you about your experience working internationally with your clients. So I wish, my desire had been to have your life, right? Yeah. I always had the drive and the desire to work internationally as well. And so tell me a little bit about how it is, you're in Tokyo and you're serving international clients. And so what kind of flavor does that add to the work that you do?
Yeah. It's very interesting because I'm in a country where, I see things differently because my reading level is a little bit lower. I can communicate okay, but I'm by no way fluent. I have communication ability. So there are a lot of things that I'm not able to read. So I notice colors, I notice textures, I notice how people feel in situations. And I've been living here on and off for about 10 or 15 years. So going through this experience throughout my life, and then experiencing people who I can't communicate 100% with, not only in Japanese, but maybe in other languages, and seeing that that's very much so what happens in branding, that we have an idea, and sometimes we're crystal clear on that idea, but when we put it out into the world, just, by the way things work, there will be someone who will interpret it completely differently. There will be someone who doesn't understand it at all. And there will be people who completely understand it. And also acknowledging that sometimes there are things that we need to change in how we communicate in order for people to understand us better. And going through that every single day, constantly thinking, when I'm chatting with other moms at the park, when I take my daughter after school, like, is this person really understanding? What do I need to do in order for them to understand me better? And that might not only be through words. And that's what branding is, right? It's not only showing, it's not only using words, it's how do we convey some kind of feeling using all of our perception, all of our senses that we have available to us. Yeah.
It's such an interesting parallel, isn't it? And especially if you start going to other countries where, you may have even less capability. And I think that when people make big shifts in their business and even into different, maybe even in the same market, but just to a different segment or to, a new piece of the market or a new offering, it still feels that same way. It's like, what do I say? How do I really convey this? And do I need to show up differently? Because it's true. If I'm moving from working with this type of entrepreneur to that next level of type of entrepreneur, I have to show up differently to meet them where they are. And I think that's the case for most businesses as well, if they're going to make a big shift.
Yeah, I think I really like what you said about meeting people where they are and looking further into how you can do that, because it's meeting them where they are as yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a difference between building a personal brand and building like a business brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of people talk about the differences. I think they are fundamentally the same. They come from the same place, the same framework, but they're executed differently. Because just as in business, when you're working as a team of one versus a team of a few or many, you have to change your operations. So, there's more communication involved. There are more explanations. There's more kind of making sure that things are interpreted correctly on the back end.
Right. And a personal brand, I mean, the way that it is manifested is going to be a little bit different too, right?
Yes.
I feel like there's a little bit more emotion and a little bit more, we dive a little bit more personally into the person and their shared experiences, as opposed to, at more of a like a corporate level where we're talking more about the collective whole, right?
Right. And there can be, of course, personal brands that have a big team behind them.
Yeah.
Or, a brand that's not a personal brand, that is a team of one. It can work both ways. But there are kind of different things that go into both. When you have a personal brand, you of course have to curate what it's okay to share.
Right.
We talk a lot about being vulnerable being a good thing, but then you deserve your privacy and your safety as well. So understanding what goes into that, what feels right, and for also, if you're building a brand that's not a personal brand, then the whole process of creating that entity.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about on your side of the business. What has growth meant for you, and how have you been managing or building your own growth?
Growth has been a lot of me understanding my process better. Because when I first started out, mid 2000s as a freelance designer, it was really just about what the client wanted and kind of giving my opinion, but mostly it was about doing what they wanted. And then I found that was the greatest risk that could ever be undertaken by the business owner, because they had no insight. It's like you go to a doctor and you tell them what medicine you want, but you don't have that further insight. So seeing that my clients were not getting any closer to their goals, and right away that led me to dig into, how does branding function as a business tool? So it set me off on a mission to talk to colleagues who are working in big agencies to understand how this can actually work. How can I leverage this design in order to help people reach their goals or move forward toward their goals, not just having something that looks great, because we need to have that too. But my growth has been it's just been a continuous process, and I continue to learn and work on that, learning how branding is moving forward. So constantly digging into how to better serve my clients. On the flip side, becoming a parent, everything changes, and priorities change and grow. And something I heard you say as well is that something to the effect of that we're not doing work in the medical field. We're not doing things that have the kind of urgency that someone would lose their life if we need to change our schedules. So being a parent, understanding that and understanding how to serve my clients, but also to honor my family and honor my different roles in my life.
100%. That balance is really, really critical. And I think somebody said that to me once when I was working on a project. It was like 11 o'clock at night and we were still at the office, and I was just like hammering away. And he says, go home. He goes, we're not saving lives, right? If we have to push the deadline by another day, it's fine. Because I don't know, something had happened and the project got delayed or whatever. And I was working so hard to catch up. And I was like, you know what, you're right. That really resonated with me, because and then all of a sudden it just started taking the pressure off of everything. And if I don't get all this stuff done, like there's no business police that are going to come and and slap me with a fine. So how are you finding your clients? Like, where do they typically come from for you?
Most of my clients do come from from referrals, or if I go to some kind of, in the past, now we don't go to so many events, but going to events and talking with people just through my extended network is usually how it works. I do have some people who find me through social media or through my website, but mostly referrals.
Yeah, I know that you produce some great content on a pretty regular basis, and I was wondering if that factors in quite a bit.
I do really love speaking, and speaking helps me clarify my ideas. In the past, it was journaling, but I find speaking and video are really helpful for me to share. So part of that is my own process, and part of it is also for reaching out and helping people, having people connect with me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, the content that we create typically is there to strengthen our brand. And then all of the outreach and the visibility and the showing up that we do is where we find our new clients. And then they see our content and learn a bit more about us, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How would you say your industry has shifted or changed over the years since you kind of started?
I think that there is more understanding now on the client side of starting to be, more understanding of what branding actually is. So there's that. And then also on, with among other brand professionals, there's this kind of movement these days that everybody wants to call themselves a strategist because people are seeing the value in it. So there's that kind of trendiness factor. I mean, I've been doing that before that was a thing, but yeah, you see more strategists out there. I'm not sure about their processes, but you see more strategists. You see people trying to offer more, whether it's more logo iterations or more, I think, in-depth services. So rather than just being an order taker.
Yeah. And I think that branding is one of those places that you don't want to cheap out, right?
Yeah. I mean, branding, marketing, and sales. I mean, together with, your business strategy, branding, marketing, and sales, those three feed directly into each other. It's like these four parts that if one of them is out of alignment or one of them is missing, then I think, you'll feel it and you'll see how that reaction comes out. So all of those need to be honored.
And do you ever find yourself working collaboratively with anyone sort of adjacent to you on that continuum?
I do. I've worked in conjunction with marketing specialists, marketing strategists, also business consultants. So I find that understanding the different pieces, and I love And then I love to work phase by phase, because it doesn't make sense to do everything out of the bat. You don't need to go from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
Go phase one, working collaboratively on the business side, on the marketing side, on the sales side, seeing, okay, launch something, test and change.
Yeah.
Test and change, refine.
Yeah.
Okay, then does it make sense? Is the revenue coming? Should we go to phase two?
Yeah. And I get the sense from you that that's kind of been how you've built your own business too, is just test and change, test and change. And so what, if there was something that you could say that you sort of wish that you knew before you got started, what would that be?
When I got started, I didn't want to be a business owner. So there are a lot of things that, I mean, when you jump into this, there are a lot of things that you wish you knew, but I wish starting out that I knew more about brand strategy and the impact that it has on design. Because there was a short time, I got into that pretty quickly, but there was a short time that I served clients who I wasn't able to bring that into the picture. And I wish I could have at that time.
But you learned.
Yes.
And you grew and you did. You probably learned very quickly too.
Well, we're always learning, right? Continue to learn.
And now you've developed sort of your own take on that, right?
Yeah, it came through lots of different iterations and very, very customized, versions of this framework that I did for many years.
Yeah. What's different about branding in the kind of the health and wellness space as opposed to, say manufacturing or like a service-based business?
Health and wellness, it's really about honoring people's feelings. So when you honor people's feelings, you need to convey even more so the approach that you have. Right. Because a lot of times you don't have statistics, you don't have hard facts or data you can't quantify your work in the same way other industries can. So, of course, sharing a combination of both of your background, honoring the sources, if you're using practices from other cultures, honoring those sources together with your own message, a balance of conveying all of those things, that happens through branding. So without doing that, you can be interpreted as doing any number of things.
Yeah, it's important. And I think that it's also one of those industries where that and sort of the spiritual space, it's one of those industries where people are constantly telling you shouldn't be charging for your work, right? It's helping and it's meant to be accessible. And, to me, that's kind of bogus. And there's a whole other conversation to be had about that. But I think your branding also has an impact on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The way people perceive you then drives how much they are willing to pay for your services.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and that can mean any number of things. I've had clients do sliding scales. I've had clients do all sorts of things, depending on what type of client they're serving or customer they're serving. And all of that needs to be conveyed.
Yeah. I often tell my clients that your pricing is there to support your brand, right? And whatever even if you're a discount brand or whether you're a luxury brand, your pricing is there to support that and to communicate and manifest that to your clients and help them understand where they belong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's next for you?
I'm digging more into my work these days. My daughter is just about to be 6. So it's just been very recent that I've been able to have more of my mental space, being able to.
I remember those days. Yeah.
So I absolutely love the work that I do. So it's continuing with my work, working closely with clients and diving into their stories and continuing to learn.
Awesome. And is there a direction or is there something that's been really kind of piquing your interest that you would love to dig further into?
Books always have fascinated with me. So that might be a book, maybe something that would be in the future. as we return more to in-person events, that's something I would love to do, something in person with different business owners. I think that collaboration is really powerful, and sharing space with someone in person is so different. And I think a lot of us crave that. So
especially after the last couple of years, that's for sure.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
But an interesting social commentary. I think when we get our heads up and out of all of this, there's going to be some pretty interesting stuff to consume about what happened, right?
Yeah.
What happened to us socially and economically and anthropologically, right?
Yeah. But I'm always looking forward, always thinking, being ahead of trends and looking at, what that looks like, both for me and for other businesses. So thinking about, different ways to communicate and different ways to connect. So I feel like I can set goals, but then as I move forward, that tends to change and shift. And so, just thinking about what feels right and the new connections coming forward.
Awesome. I have a question that I ask everybody just before we finish up. There's a lot that goes on out there, especially in the online business space. And I always feel like there's a little bit of a gap, right, between what's real and what we sort of see and hear, especially if you're a new business owner. So in your opinion, what is the difference between what's real as a business owner and what we hear as messaging out there in the world?
I think that what's real is what you experience in your daily life, and acknowledging that reality is okay. It's very easy to get caught up in what other people curate and show, but knowing that your reality is valid and that's okay, and that you get to decide what you share with other people in the online space, just as you do in your daily life.
And it can be some combination of, what one person shares and what another person shares. I just don't think there are any rules, right?
There are no rules. The only rules, I think, and this is what I tell my daughter, honor your own feelings and don't hurt anyone else. Yeah. Those are the only rules. So along with that, decide what feels right for you.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, we're coming up on time. Can you tell everybody where they can find you? And we'll put all of the links in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Jaime DDO, and you can also find me on my website at Studio Ayuto.
I love it. Okay. Well, we're at the end of our time together, but I want to thank you so much for especially coming internationally and taking the time to speak with me today. I always love connecting with you. I think on Instagram, we're always talking and seeing your content. And I'm so glad we had the opportunity to chat today and hear more about how your business came to be and your experience along the way and what the future for your business entails. And I can't wait to see where you end up in the next few years. And thank you for tuning into this episode of the Real People, Real Business Show, where we get the real entrepreneurial stories and journeys that you can relate to. The show notes, resources, and special offers from this episode are available on my website and social media platforms. Thanks again for joining us today. And if you've enjoyed today's content, I would love for you to give us a review on whatever platform you're on to help us share these genuine stories with an even bigger audience. Till next time, keep building, keep dreaming, and keep being real.